Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's segment of the Bama Factor with Alex Taylor. I'm your host, as always, Alex Taylor, and a lot to unpack in this episode as we head into the off week for the Crimson Tide. We're going to be recapping the huge road win at Wisconsin from this past week. Kind of going to be talking some injury updates. Talking about some things to watch for in the off week, some things that I think need to be addressed at this point already in the season, 3 weeks in. Kind of got a good feel for how the team is going to shape up and what we need to look forward to Georgia. But I'm not going to get too much into Georgia because I want to save that for next week's episode as I really break down our game against Georgia. Also, going to be revealing week 4 of the AT poll, top 25, and please let me know what you guys think of that, who I have too high or who I have too low, or who should be there or who shouldn't be there. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into the episode. So obviously Alabama coming off a huge road win, the first of the Kalen DeBoer era, um, in Wisconsin last Saturday, 42-10 over Wisconsin, and a dominant showing all the way around. Um, Starting with our player of the week, SEC player of the week, for sure, and that would be Jalen Milroe. So, when you look at Milroe and his performance, his QBR 89.9, 12 of 17, 196, three passing touchdowns, and then on the ground, 14 carries, 75 yards, and adding two additional touchdowns. So 5 touchdowns overall. Again, another really, really solid performance for him. And just really seeing him get comfortable in this offense is what you as a fan really want to see from him. And Jalen Milroe, from really this point last year, we've already seen him take strides this year, and he's way ahead of where he was last year because I feel like he's in an offensive system that can work with him, that can work to his strengths. And I don't even think we've seen even the tip of the iceberg of what this offense is capable of yet. I think we saw previews of it the first 3 weeks, but now that we're getting further into the season and now we're getting into the crux of the schedule and we're getting into SEC play, I think you're going to see this offense open up a whole lot more. So Jalen Milroe, player of the week, going to be absolutely a player to watch going forward, of course. Sticking with the running game as well, Jam Miller, 9 carries, 71 yards, had a tremendous and just a absolute just elite touchdown run in the game Saturday. Just a quick burst straight up the middle, good blocking by the offensive line. Justice Haynes, only 2 carries, 17 yards, not really involved in this game, but I expect to see him more involved going forward. That's something else we'll talk about next week as well. Richard Young also got in, 3 carries, 16 yards, did go down with an injury. Hopefully it's not too bad, and we hope that he makes a full recovery. Going to the receiving room, obviously Jalen, 33 touchdowns, and on the receiving end, Josh Swavis, the tight end transfer from Washington, hauled in 1 catch for 37 yards and a touchdown. Jeremy Bernard, also transfer from Washington as well, getting in the scoring column this year. 3 catches for 55 yards and a touchdown. And the true freshman, 17-year-old sensation, Ryan Hollywood Williams, again, 4 catches, 78 yards and a touchdown, really making his name known again. And then shifting over to the other side of the ball on the defensive side, Jahad Campbell leading the way with total tackles of 8. Again, right behind him is Deontay Lawson with 7. Malachi Moore with 7 tackles as well. Keon Sabb with 6. But really the player of the day for the Crimson Tide, LT Overton on the defensive line, 6 total tackles, 4 solo. 2 solo, 1 sack, and 1 tackle for a loss. But he was just everywhere that day. And if he wasn't in there, he was assisting on tackles. He was creating pressure. I think he's going to be a guy to watch out for. I think he's a 285-pound wrecking machine. And LT Overton, just a wonderful performance from him as well. Overall, the defense pretty solid. Did give up kind of a long drive there in the second half. Kind of got gassed on the run a little bit. They did run for 149 yards, but the Tide did hold Wisconsin under 300 yards at 290. Held them to 3 of 14 on third down. The Tide themselves racked up 407 total, 226 through the air, 181 on the ground. Tide limited the penalties to only 4, so very, very well improved from a week ago against South Florida as well. Tide creating 2 turnovers as well in the fumble category and recovering those. So creating turnovers is a huge thing for this team as well. And sticking with our game from last week, we're going to take you to this week's win poster brought to you by yours truly as well. You can catch this on my Instagram as well. Should be popping up here. And this week's slogan is Home Invaders. The whole thing for the whole week was, home invasion. And, that's really what, the guys looked at this as. They wanted to empty the stadium in Wisconsin. They did just that. So super proud of these guys for how they competed this week. And, to go on the road, in the first game of the DeBoer era on the road, and you want to see how a team is going to perform against a quality opponent in a hostile environment in an early game, far from home, and they answered the call ultimately, and I think the team deserves to be praised for that. So now, just kind of jumping in to some injury news real quick. We had several players get injured in the game, so I'll just kind of address kind of what I've heard this week. Cole Adams, who got injured in the South Florida game, who obviously didn't see any action this past weekend, should be good to go for Georgia, kind of working back from his arm injury. Obviously, Malachi Moore went down, went through concussion protocol, but he has been cleared. Everything is good with Malachi as well. So, very happy to hear that as well. Richard Young, haven't heard a ton on him, but obviously haven't heard anything that he's out for the season. I think his ankle got twisted up. So I did see a picture of him on his Instagram today. He did not have a brace on. He hasn't had surgery. So if it was an ACL, he would have already had surgery, and we would have already known. But the biggest name in the injury news, probably to all the Tide fans, is Quay Russaw. Went down kind of after an awkward twisting of his leg Saturday, and a lot of people tend to lean towards the ACL tear, but there was no ACL tear. Kalen DeBoer spoke on him and said that it is just hopefully just a twist of the ankle, and he will actually be able to start doing stuff later in this week, hopefully towards Thursday or Friday. So that is huge news for the defense and for Quay himself, because he is a game changer on that side of the ball. So injury news, all positives, and that's always a good thing to hear. The off week could not have come at a better time. Now we can get everybody healthy. Some of the guys who were even banged up, who really weren't on the injury report, this is a good time for them to get healed and healthy as well. So now I'm going to head to some questions that you guys sent in through my Instagram, and a lot of these kind of repeat themselves, and I've get a lot of questions from the same people as well, but I've got a lot of responses here. Just going to pick out a couple. So the first one that I'm seeing is predictions for the Georgia game and what's the biggest challenge facing the Tide. So I'm going to hold off on the prediction because I'm going to do that next week for the Georgia episode. So I will answer that question because I will have my prediction next week. But as far as the biggest challenge facing the Tide, it's obviously, now you're getting into the crux of your schedule. You're getting into where, these first 3 weeks have kind of been your trial and error. You can afford to turn the ball over a little bit. You can afford to kind of play bad. You don't want to, but you can afford to because lesser teams. But now you're getting into elite SEC teams. You're getting into teams that are going to test you each week. You're getting into higher caliber athletes. So you have to be sure that everything is ironed out at this point. And there can be no complacency going forward. And I don't think there is any on the team, but now you've got to lock in and you've really got to execute at a high level. So I think that's the biggest challenge facing them right now is just, you've got to turn it up a little bit. Someone said you should do a combined pod with Ryan Williams and Jalen Mbakwe on their pod. Hey, I'm always down. If Hollywood and Bach ever want to do a collab, I'll be glad to have them on here. I would love to have these guys on here. And then it said, what ultimately led you to Alabama as opposed to Auburn? Okay, I don't really know what this person's asking. I don't obviously play for Alabama, but what ultimately led you to Alabama? So I grew up an Alabama fan. So um, first of all, I didn't really have a choice, but obviously getting into football at an early age, and obviously, um, me and my dad, obviously going to a lot of Alabama games over the years. I mean, obviously, I haven't wanted to cheer for any other team, and Alabama's just Alabama. They're the standard, and I'm proud to be an Alabama fan. I was even an Alabama fan in the lean years, in the hard years, to be an Alabama fan, and those were some hard years. So, but yeah, that's what ultimately led me to that. This is a good question. A player that transferred that you wish wouldn't have transferred. And this is hard because now I'm kind of seeing, these guys who transferred are on their new teams and they're not performing well. Or you take Florida State, for example, who took 5 Alabama transfers and they're 0-3 right now. And personally, this may sound harsh. I don't feel sorry for any of them because you chose to bail out of Alabama and you thought the grass was greener and it wasn't. Um, but a guy who transferred that I wish wouldn't have, for me, probably Roydell Williams, and that's the only guy from Florida State that I'll say because Roydell was just I think he bled Alabama, but he gave everything that he could to Alabama. He graduated from there, and I think he wanted a place where he could be the starter for a year. I think he read the writing on the wall with Jam and Justice and how they were pushing, for the starting role, and I think he kind of read that they were going to be a bigger part of this offense than he was. And I commend him for that. And I feel bad for him, but I don't feel bad for any of the other guys from Alabama who transferred at all. And then I got one that said, how many yards for Ryan Williams? Well, at this point, he's over 200 for the year, 3 games in. 1,000's not out of the question. So I think, over 1,000 could be a possibility for him. So I would say anywhere over 1,000. If anywhere on the lower end, if I had to shoot, probably 800 would be a good freshman campaign. Um, then I've got one that says, "Can Jalen Milroe hit 1,000 yards rushing?" And I think with how the offense is currently being called, I think he can. But if he doesn't, that's okay. But I think in this year's offense, I think he potentially can. So I think that's going to be very interesting to see from that standpoint. And one more question. Like I said, I got a ton of these, and I can answer more in next week's episode. But it says, "Do you think Alabama will humble everyone?" And the answer that I want to say to this is yes, is because but we have to play our ball game. We can't get in our own way. If we stay out of our own way, we keep everything in front of us, and we go 1-0 each week, and we have that type of attitude each week, then we can humble anybody. But if the media wants to talk and these other teams want to keep talking, they can. But we're going to keep working and trusting each other in that aspect, I believe. So yes, I think they can. So now we're going to head on to our kind of final segment of this as I drop this week's rendition of the AT Poll Top 25 here right on the Bama Factor with Alex Taylor, as you see it pop up right here. So we have the Week 4 AT Poll Top 25, and we'll kind of give my explanation for those of y'all who are just first tuning in to any episodes here. So number 1, I got Texas, great showing against UTEP. Quinn Ewers going down, but Arch stepped up and did fairly well. So, got to give it to Texas. Texas now kind of getting into the crux of their schedule. They have Louisiana Monroe this week, has Georgia on the horizon in a few weeks as well. So, Texas is seriously making some noise as of right now. I did vault the Crimson Tide up to 2, just simply because of their win on the road, how they won, the quality of opponent as well. And I think we're playing at a high level right now, and we corrected a lot of things. And one thing I didn't address too is the play of the offensive line. Great to have Caden Proctor back. Pritchett on the other side of the line. Obviously Tyler Booker, Jaden Roberts, Parker Brailsford. Those 5 right there, I think, is the best 5 in America when they're on the field. And you obviously saw that. They kept the pressure off of Milroe. They opened up lanes. They just absolutely just destroying the front of Wisconsin the entire time. So I've got to give it to the offensive line, and they earned Outland Players of the Week. The entire unit did. So hats off to the offensive line. 3 Ohio State, obviously 3-0, continuing to dominate as well. They play Marshall this week, but then they get into the crux of the Big Ten schedule. Drop Georgia to 4 as they suffered a scare at Kentucky. In my opinion, if Kentucky has a better quarterback, they win that game. Some questionable coaching calls from Stoops in that game. But Georgia scraped by the skin of their teeth. But it's a win. It's a win. And, you have those games. Alabama's had those games. Everybody does. But, good teams find a way to win. And Georgia found a way to win. 5, Ole Miss just continuing to really dominate on offense. Still kind of want to wait till they play some actual opponents. Their first 4 here are just not really that good, but still performing at a high level. Tennessee looking very sharp. Still kind of the opponent thing. Kent State, not the best opponent, but still to put up 71 points is very impressive. And then you have Miami, who I think has improved this year, has South Florida this weekend at South Florida. That's going to be an interesting game to watch as well. That's kind of going to be a measuring stick of how good South Florida is. You do have at 8. I have the Missouri Tigers scraping by Boston College. I tell you, they are really starting to make a little bit of noise in the ACC. I think the Eagles can this year, but they survive a scare in Missouri. I have USC at 9, still riding high off their win against LSU a few weeks ago. Oregon at 10. Penn State at 11, Utah at 12, not really much change there. Oklahoma now at 13 as they prepare for a matchup against Tennessee this weekend in Oklahoma. Got Kansas State at 14, continuing to win. Oklahoma State at 15. LSU sitting there at 16. LSU grinding out a win at South Carolina. Game could have gone either way on that, so they kind of scraped by the skin of their teeth. Louisville at 17. Notre Dame jumping back up after a huge win after a loss last week to NIU. I have the Wolverines at number 19, also kind of in the win column again as they get prepared for USC this weekend. That will be interesting. Clemson also jumping back into my top 25. Also getting a coming off of a bye week as they get ready for NC State this weekend. Hopefully they can find their groove. Nebraska at 21. This is going to be interesting because Nebraska and Illinois play each other this weekend, both 3-0 in Nebraska, I believe. So super excited to see that game right there. I think that's going to be a good top 25 game to watch. Have Iowa State at 22, continuing to play very well. NIU still continuing their good season so far, still kind of riding the high of the Notre Dame win from last week, and then vaulting into the top 25 for the first time this year in the AT poll are the Tigers in Memphis, who just came off a huge win at Florida State. And I say huge win because, group of 5, obviously beating a Power 4 team, but Florida State in absolute shambles right now, and Coach Mike Norvell's seat might be getting a little bit warm, especially after what you did last year, and now you start off this year 0-3. But that is this week's rendition of the AT poll top 25. We'll have another brand new one after this week of college football. Of course, Alabama, like I said, is off this week. Georgia is also off. So a lot of the top teams not playing this week, but a lot of the other ones are. But setting up the showdown for next Saturday night, Alabama and Georgia, going to be a top 5 game in Tuscaloosa. I will personally be at the game. I'm super excited about it. But, the Tide, we have to take care of business. And, I think we've had a good week of practice this week. I'm anxious to see what we do next week, really going into the prep for that as well. But shorter episode tonight, guys. Thank you for tuning in. As always, remember, you can catch a brand new episode of the Bama Factor with Alex Taylor every Thursday, streaming on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok for all of your Alabama football breaking news, practice highlights, game recap, graphics, and even more. Be sure to follow me at the Bama Factor on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We would also like to take this time to say that we are a proud member of the College Huddle, which is the largest fan led podcasting service in the country. Over 79 podcasts, 79 separate schools represented in the College Huddle. So be sure, if you want to learn more about the College Huddle, check out thecollegehuddle.com. You can check out my page there. You can go to the members tab. It will break us down by conference. It will break us down alphabetically. You can click on my logo there. Should have my logo that you see in the bottom left corner of my screen here. And you can see all my bio when I started my podcast. You can see other members as well. You can see who the hosts are. You can see their episodes, all their links to their YouTubes, TikToks, Spotify's, Instagrams, Twitters, whatever social platforms that they are on. And you can also get insights to articles. And if you are a podcaster that is for a school that is not currently represented by the College Huddle, you can also inquire to join the College Huddle as well, as this has provided a lot of good opportunities for me personally to collab with other podcasters who share the same passion that I do for their schools. Has led to a lot of friendships, have led to a lot of, just good overall episodes of where we can talk about our schools in a good setting and collab and help each other grow as well. Through life and through our podcast and through our page. But guys, love each and every one of you guys. Can't wait to be back next week at the same time to preview Alabama and Georgia, the biggest game of the year could be, especially for the Crimson Tide and for Georgia, and can kind of start to shape a little bit of the SEC race. So super excited about next week, guys. But whenever you see this, whenever you watch, and wherever you're watching from, good night and God bless and roll tide.